Have you ever felt invisible despite giving your whole heart to something that matters? Have you ever wondered if anyone truly sees the sacrifices made in the shadows, the tender mercies offered when no one is watching? She did, for years. In a world that celebrates the loudest voices and brightest achievements, Ellie Harper moved through hospital corridors with quiet purpose, holding broken pieces together while others rushed past. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when he first truly saw her, as in not just looked but saw. In the shadows of a dimly lit hospital room, a young nurse knelt beside an elderly patient, her fingers gently working warmth back into a hand paralyzed by stroke. No cameras recorded this moment. No supervisors stood watch. Just a simple act of human dignity that shouldn't have stopped him in his tracks, yet did. What's the return on investment for kindness? He would later wonder. This man who had built an empire calculating the value of everything. In a world where efficiency is measured in minutes saved and costs reduced, sometimes we forget that healing happens in the unmeasured moments between the charts and checklists, and sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply being present when someone needs us most. This is the story of how a shy nurse, overlooked, underestimated, nearly invisible within the system she served, awakened a forgotten truth in a man who had spent a lifetime measuring everything, except what truly mattered. The fluorescent lights of Savannah Regional Hospital cast long shadows as night settled over Georgia. In room 412, Eleanor Harper, Ellie to the few who truly noticed her, tenderly applied a warm compress to Mr. Abernathy's paralyzed hand. At 26, her gentle features held a wisdom that belied her years, her copper hair hastily gathered in a practical bun, her movements carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had witnessed both suffering and grace. "Your daughter called today," Ellie said softly, massaging each finger with methodical care. "She's sending those records you wanted, the Chopin nocturnes." Mr. Abernathy's cloudy eyes brightened momentarily. "You remembered?" "Of course," she smiled, reaching into her pocket. From her worn uniform, she produced a small tin of peppermint tea and a battered volume of poetry, modest treasures carried like talismans through long shifts. "My father always said peppermint soothes more than the stomach," she explained, pouring steaming water from a thermos she'd prepared earlier. "It reminds us that small comforts matter most when everything else feels uncertain." The old piano, teacher's hands once capable of coaxing magic from ivory keys, now lay mostly unresponsive. But as the warm scent of peppermint filled the air, his right hand twitched slightly, fingers seeking a melody only he could hear. "They remember," Ellie said, noticing the movement. "Your hands remember the music." What the patient charts didn't record was how Ellie arrived 30 minutes before each shift to prepare these small rituals of dignity. How she kept a leather-bound notebook documenting each patient's stories: Mr. Abernathy's lighthouse in Maine, Mrs. Patterson's prize-winning roses, young Jamie's dream of seeing mountains. She placed these fragments of identity beside clinical notes as if they held equal healing power, which, in her quiet experience, they often did. 3 floors above, in a conference room overlooking Savannah's twilight, Daniel Rhodes scrutinized spreadsheets with the intensity that had built his healthcare data empire. At 34, his sharp features reflected the precision with which he'd constructed both his algorithms and the walls around his heart. The glow of his laptop cast harsh shadows across a face unaccustomed to softening. "The metrics for Savannah Regional are inconsistent," he observed, eyes never leaving the screen. "Cost efficiency below average, yet recovery outcomes exceeding projections, particularly in long-term rehabilitation." Director Wilson shifted uncomfortably, straightening his tie reflexively. "We've implemented cutting-edge protocols. Numbers don't lie," Daniel interrupted, finally looking up. His grey eyes, analytical and cool, fixed on Wilson with uncomfortable intensity. "Something's happening here that isn't captured in your reports. Tomorrow I want to see everything, especially what you're not showing me." The executive boardroom fell silent. The hospital administrators exchanged glances, recognizing what was at stake. Daniel Rhodes's $10 million rural hospital initiative could transform their struggling facility or pass them over entirely. What the reports couldn't show was how 15 years earlier, a teenage Daniel had sat beside his mother's hospital bed watching as overworked staff rushed past her room, too busy to notice her silent tears or straighten her blankets. How he'd held her hand when she'd whispered, "It's not their fault, Danny. The system doesn't make room for kindness." How he'd promised her then that he would fix it, not knowing that his solution would sacrifice the very humanity she'd been missing. In the quiet of his hotel room later that night, Daniel pulled out his mother's worn copy of Robert Frost, the one possession of hers he'd kept. The spine cracked open to "The Road Not Taken." He ran his finger over the familiar lines, then closed the book and returned to his laptop. There were metrics to analyze, systems to optimize, decisions to make. Two worlds existed in that. Hospital, one of numbers and procedures, another of whispered stories and small kindnesses. By morning they would collide. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity, shift changes, medication rounds, the mechanical rhythm of a hospital awakening. Ellie moved through her final rounds, her gentle presence a counterpoint to the institutional bustle around her. "Harper." The head nurse's voice cut through the corridor. "The administrator needs all staff at the station. Some big investor is touring today." Her tone carried the unstated directive. "Look busy, look efficient, show only what will impress." Ellie nodded, finishing her notes before quietly slipping away. In the staff lounge, she changed from her night shift scrubs, pausing to touch the small photograph in her locker. Her father in his truck driver's uniform, smiling despite the illness that would eventually take him. His eyes crinkled at the corners the same way hers did when she smiled genuinely. "Another day of making you proud, Dad," she whispered, a ritual as sacred to her as any prayer. As she gathered her belongings, worn backpack containing her lunch, journal, and always another book of poetry, the lounge door opened without warning. Director Wilson entered with a tall figure, whose expensive suit seemed at odds with the hospital's worn floors. "Ah, Nurse Harper," Wilson said, clearly surprised. "I thought night shift had cleared out. This is Mr. Rhodes, our potential investor." Daniel Rhodes extended his hand mechanically, his attention already drifting to the whiteboard displaying staff assignments. But as their hands briefly met, something unexpected registered in his expression, a flicker of recognition, though. They'd never met. "You're leaving?" he asked, more directly than he'd intended. "My shift ended at 7, Ellie replied softly, her voice carrying the slight hoarseness that came from reading aloud through quiet hours. "I was just finishing notes," Daniel nodded, turning back to Wilson, but not before noticing the book in her bag. "Frost," he commented, surprising himself. "My mother used to read him." Ellie's eyes widened slightly. In them, Daniel caught a glimpse of something rare in his data-driven world, genuine presence, uncalculated and unperforming. He understood quiet things, she offered, then slipped past them both. Daniel watched her go, distracted by the contradiction she presented, her presence somehow both unmistakable and easily overlooked in the hospital's hierarchy. The morning proceeded according to plan. Guided tours through gleaming departments, presentations of cutting-edge equipment, graphs demonstrating improved efficiency metrics. Yet Daniel found himself increasingly distracted by what wasn't being shown, by who wasn't being introduced. "And the long-term recovery ward?" he finally asked, interrupting a detailed explanation of their new surgical suite. Director Wilson hesitated. "That section is due for upgrades next quarter. Perhaps we should focus on—" "I'd like to see it now," Daniel stated, his tone making clear it wasn't a request. The journey to the long-term recovery ward required navigating away from the hospital's showcase areas, down corridors where paint had faded and equipment showed signs of extended use. The long-term recovery corridor felt different immediately, quieter, dimmer, with an intimacy missing from the showcase departments. The walls held framed watercolors created by patients instead of achievement certificates. Small touches, handmade quilts, personal photographs, window ledges with modest plants, softened the institutional setting. "Who manages this ward?" Daniel asked, noting how Mozart played softly from a patient's room instead of the hospital's standard ambient music. "It's a rotation," Wilson explained vaguely, clearly uncomfortable. "Though Nurse Harper handles most night shifts here, she has a special rapport with long-term patients." Daniel paused at a room where an elderly man was attempting to move his fingers over a small keyboard placed across his lap. The expression of frustrated determination on his face spoke of both loss and stubborn hope. "That's Mr. Abernathy," Wilson explained, checking his watch impatiently. "Former piano teacher. Stroke affected his right side 18 months ago." Daniel stepped closer, watching as the man struggled to press a single key. On the bedside table sat a collection of items, sheet music with handwritten notations, a thermos still emanating faint wisps of steam, a tin labeled peppermint, and a leather-bound notebook with daily progress written on its cover. He picked up the notebook, flipping it open to find daily entries. Monday, maintained flexion. For 30 seconds. Listen to Chopin recording, emotional response to nocturne op. Died Tuesday. Attempted scales, frustration, but continued for full 5 minutes. Progress. Wednesday, first successful C note played. Smiled for first time this week. Something about these modest objects, arranged with such obvious care, held his attention more than all the expensive equipment he'd been shown all morning. Here was evidence of a different kind of medicine, one his algorithms had never been designed to measure. What would our healthcare system look like if we valued both efficiency and empathy? Daniel is starting to see what his data missed, those immeasurable moments that truly heal. Have you ever witnessed someone bridge two different worlds like Ellie and Daniel are about to do? Share your experience in the comments. The most powerful part of their journey is just ahead, and it might change how you see the invisible. Heroes in your own life. Stay with us for the next chapter of the story, where everything begins to change. That evening, unable to shake his curiosity about what he'd glimpsed in the long-term ward, Daniel returned to the hospital alone. The night shift had begun, the corridors quieter as patients settled for the night. As he approached the long-term recovery wing, soft voices drew him toward a partially open door. Inside, he saw Ellie sitting beside Mr. Abernathy's bed, her copper hair now loose from its bun, her hands gently supporting his as they moved together over the small keyboard. "That's it," she encouraged softly. "Remember what you told me? It's not about strength, it's about memory. Your fingers remember 40 years of Chopin, but they won't obey anymore," the old man said, frustration edging his voice. "What's the point?" Daniel recognized the same despair he'd heard in his mother's voice, the desolation of someone whose body had betrayed them, whose identity was slipping away piece by piece. "Then we'll teach them patience," Ellie replied, applying a warm compress to his hand before returning it to the keys. "Like you taught all those students when their fingers wouldn't cooperate. One note at a time," she leaned closer. "Tell me again about your first recital." As the old man began recounting a childhood memory, his anxiety visibly eased. Ellie used this moment of relaxation to guide his fingers through a simple exercise again. "Your body remembers," she reminded him, "even when your mind doubts." Daniel stood transfixed, watching as she guided him through the same simple sequence repeatedly, her quiet persistence matching the patient's determination. There was something profoundly intimate about the scene, not the rushed efficiency of professional obligation, but the unhurried presence of someone who understood that healing involves more than medicine. After 15 minutes, when Mr. Abernathy successfully pressed 3 consecutive keys, his face transformed with a joy that seemed disproportionate to the modest achievement. Yet Daniel understood instantly that this small victory represented something profound about dignity and purpose. "You did it!" Ellie's genuine delight matched her patience. She made a careful notation in the journal. 3 notes in sequence, held for 5 seconds, longest duration yet. Your neurons are rebuilding those pathways. When she rose to leave, she discovered Daniel in the doorway. A fleeting expression of alarm crossed her face. Not fear of authority, but something more protective, as if she'd been caught in an act of rebellion against a system that prioritized efficiency over such unmeasurable moments. "Mr. Rhodes," she acknowledged quietly, stepping into the hallway. "Please, Daniel," he corrected, then gestured toward Mr. Abernathy, now resting with his eyes closed, his damaged hand resting on the keyboard with a piece that hadn't been there before. "That wasn't in any protocol I reviewed today." Ellie hesitated. "No, it's not." "Then why?" The question remained unfinished. She met his gaze directly for the first time, her warm brown eyes steady with quiet conviction. Because his hands were his voice in the world for 40 years. When we lose our voice, we need someone to believe. We can find it again. The simplicity of her answer struck him with unexpected force. Like a mathematical proof so elegant, it revealed a truth that had been present all along. "Does the administration know you spend this kind of time with individual patients?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Time is the resource we're told to conserve most carefully," she replied diplomatically. Then with quiet conviction, "But sometimes it's the only medicine that works." Daniel found himself nodding, something shifting beneath the carefully constructed efficiency that had defined his career. "Would you show me," he asked, surprising them both, "your approach with these patients? I'd like to understand." For the first time, Ellie smiled fully, not the professional mask of pleasant competence, but a genuine expression that transformed her tired features. "You want to understand the anomaly in your data." He blinked, startled by her perception. "I've seen the outcomes reports they pull for investors," she explained. "Our long-term ward outperforms expectations despite minimal resources. You're trying to figure out why." "Yes," he admitted. "Numbers don't lie, but sometimes they don't tell the whole truth either." 3 nights later, against all protocol, Daniel Rhodes, dressed in simple slacks and a sweater instead of his usual tailored suit, joined Ellie for her overnight shift. He had told Director Wilson it was for comprehensive systems analysis. But as midnight approached, it felt increasingly like something else, a pilgrimage back to something essential he had forgotten. Throughout the night, Daniel observed a different kind of healthcare than his algorithms had ever captured. One where efficiency wasn't measured in minutes saved, but in moments of dignity preserved. In each room, Ellie knew not just medical histories, but personal stories. The music that calmed one patient, the way another needed her rosary placed just so before she could sleep, how a former teacher insisted on wearing his reading glasses even when no longer able to read. "How do you remember all the—" Daniel asked, genuinely bewildered. Ellie touched the notebook in her pocket. "I write it down. It matters to them, so it matters to me." At 2:17 a.m., Ellie's pager vibrated. She checked it, her expression shifting subtly. "You don't have to come for this," she told Daniel, already moving with new urgency. "What is it?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Jamie Wells, room 219. He's in hospice care, 23 years old. Motorcycle accident 3 weeks ago. Internal injuries too severe for recovery." Her voice remained professional, but Daniel caught the controlled emotion beneath it. "His family lives 8 hours away. They're driving, but they won't make it in time," Daniel finished. The room was dimly lit when they entered. A young man lay still, his breathing labored. Despite the tubes and monitors, his youth was heartbreaking, a life barely begun, already ending, without hesitation. Ellie moved to his bedside, taking his hand in hers. "Jamie," she said softly. "It's Ellie." "I'm here." The young man's eyes fluttered open briefly. "My mum," he managed, the words barely audible. "She's on her way," Ellie assured him, her free hand gently stroking his forehead. She asked me to stay with you until she arrives." From her pocket, Ellie withdrew her worn book. "You mentioned you liked the mountains," she said. "I found this poem about the Blue Ridge at sunset." As she began to read, her voice steady and clear, Daniel watched something extraordinary unfold. How the tension in Jamie's features gradually eased, how his breathing found a gentler rhythm matching Ellie's words. For nearly an hour she read poems about mountains, forests, open skies, creating through language the journey his broken body would never take. When Jamie's breathing changed, becoming shallower, she set the book aside and simply held his hand in both of hers. "You're not alone," she whispered. "It's okay to let go now, the mountains are waiting." When the monitor finally registered the absence of heartbeat, Ellie closed Jamie's eyes with gentle fingers. Then, so quietly, Daniel almost missed. "It," she whispered. "No one should die alone, and no one's journey should end unwitnessed." In the hallway afterward, Daniel found himself asking, "How do you bear this, night after night?" Ellie looked up. "My father died alone in a hospital room while I was stuck in traffic. The nurse later told me he kept asking if someone would hold his hand." She straightened a supply cart with practiced movements. "I can't change that, but I can change it for others." Daniel stood silent, suddenly understanding the weight of all he'd witnessed and all his data had missed. 15 years of healthcare innovation had failed to deliver what this quiet nurse provided every night: genuine human connection in service of both healing and dying with dignity. "Your approach," he said finally, "it's what's creating those anomalous outcomes in the long-term ward." "It's not really a protocol," Ellie corrected gently. "It's just remembering that medicine can't heal everything, but kindness helps with the parts it can't reach." In that moment, something unlocked in Daniel, a realization that all his years of optimizing healthcare had missed its essential purpose. Efficiency without compassion wasn't just incomplete, it betrayed the very people it claimed to serve. "My mother died in a hospital," he said, the words emerging from a place he'd kept sealed for 15 years. "I was there, but no one else really was. They were all too busy with more urgent cases." Ellie's expression softened with recognition. "That's why you build systems? To fix what hurt her?" "Yes," he acknowledged. "But I think I've been solving the wrong problem all along." 6 months later, Savannah Regional Hospital's long-term care wing officially reopened after extensive renovations. Gone were the institutional whites and greys, replaced by soft colors chosen by the patients themselves. Private rooms now featured comfortable chairs where family members could actually rest. A small library of books and a tea station had been added to the central area, inspired by a certain nurse's practices. More profound were the changes invisible to casual observers. New charting systems included spaces for recording patients, personal stories and preferences, not as footnotes but as essential aspects of their care. Staff schedules had been redesigned to ensure continuity of care. Most revolutionary was the implementation of dignity hours, protected time, when staff focused solely on the human elements of healing that couldn't be measured in vital signs. "The preliminary results are remarkable," Daniel explained during the quiet reception following the ribbon cutting. "Recovery times improved by 23%, reduced need for pain management, better outcomes across every measurable dimension." "And the immeasurable dimension?" Ellie asked, thinking of Mr. Abernathy, who had recently played his first complete melody on the piano, now permanently installed in the day room. His daughter had wept at the sound, saying, "That's the first time I've heard my father's voice in 2 years." Daniel's expression softened. Those might be the most important of all. The program that had begun in Savannah, now officially called the Ellie Protocol, was expanding throughout Daniel's healthcare network, transforming not just patient care but the experience of caregivers themselves. Burnout rates declined as nurses found renewed purpose in work that honored their deepest motivations for entering healthcare. Ellie still carried her peppermint tea and worn poetry book through hospital corridors. She remained quiet by nature, but her voice had grown stronger in advocating for both patients and fellow nurses. The system that had once made her feel invisible now recognized that her approach, seeing the person behind the patient, wasn't just compassionate, but more effective. And Daniel, whose life had been defined by distance and data, found himself drawn back to Savannah with increasing frequency. Something about witnessing Ellie's quiet revolution had awakened memories of his original purpose, of the promise made to his mother that healthcare could be both efficient and human. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they shared tea in the staff garden after her shift, "about what you told that patient last week." Ellie looked up questioningly. "How you said that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about honoring what remains whole." He paused, the vulnerability still unfamiliar territory. "I think I needed that healing too." In the gentle evening light, they sat in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other across the divide of their different worlds. Behind them, through the hospital windows, patients and caregivers moved in the dance of giving and receiving that makes us most human. Each one seen, each one holding and being held through the fragile journey of living. Sometimes the quietest souls make the loudest impact, and sometimes it takes seeing through the eyes of someone who notices the overlooked to remember what truly mattered all along. In the tender care of one nurse's hands, a system began to remember its heart, and a man who had built his life on data rediscovered the immeasurable value of human connection. For in the end, it is not our achievements that define us, but the moments of genuine presence we offer when it matters most, when someone stands at the threshold of pain, of fear, of the ultimate journey, and finds they are not alone. The next day, Daniel Rhodes announced to his board of directors that he was redirecting the company's $10 million investment from a cutting-edge medical center in New York to expand the Ellie protocol across rural hospitals nationwide. "But the ROI projections for New York are significantly higher," his CFO protested, pushing forward charts that had once seemed so convincing. Daniel smiled, thinking of Mr. Abernathy's 3 piano notes, of Jamie's peaceful passage, of his mother's final wish. "Some returns," he said quietly, "can't be measured in traditional metrics." And in a small hospital room in Savannah, Ellie Harper read poetry to a new patient while warming her tea, continuing the quiet work of healing that had always been there, waiting only to be seen, valued, and finally shared with the world. When asked later what had changed his entire approach to healthcare innovation, Daniel Rhodes would simply say, "I stopped measuring efficiency by time saved and started measuring it by dignity preserved." While Ellie, when asked about her sudden recognition after years of invisible service, would simply smile her gentle smile and say, "I was never really invisible. I was just waiting for someone to remember how to see." If this story touched your heart today, remember that we all have the power to truly see those who feel invisible. Who in your life is like Ellie, quietly making a difference without recognition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of kindness and human connection in a world that often values metrics over meaning, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Because sometimes the most profound healing happens in the spaces between the things we can measure. Until next time, may you both see and be truly seen.